Kings Lynn Borough Council. And also I'm sure we will have some colleagues from Yarmouth as well. So we're right the way around the Norfolk coast, which is exactly where we should be. I think what we will do is, if you wish to speak, can you introduce yourself? I hope you can all manage to use putting your hands up. I've got some very able assistants here who can let me know if I miss anybody, because I can only actually see 12 on my screen. So that could be a bit of a challenge, but I know Sandra and Emma will tell me if I've missed anybody. And with no more to do, for those of us that were at the last meeting, could we please just have a quick look at the minutes so we can approve those? And if we can do those one page at a time. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And finally, page 8. If I could please have a proposer that they and a seconder that happy for me to sign those off. Wendy, thank you. I don't know, have we got a seconder?
I got my hand up, Angie. It's John Toy.
Lovely, thanks, John. So Councillor Fredericks has proposed and Councillor Toy has seconded. That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I don't think she needs any introduction to most of you. Our very able head of Coastal Partnership East. And I'd like to pass on to Karen Thomas for Coastal Partnership East and National Update. Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Thomas. Morning, everybody. I'm just going to give you a quick run through the sort of headlines. I think, Thomas, you've got an agenda there as well. I don't know if you want to just move through the slides quickly for Angie, just in case everyone wants to just look at the agenda.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
You okay, Thomas?
He's just having a few technical difficulties.
Oh, that's okay, Fiona.
I think
Thank
he can see
you.
it on his screen, but we can't see it on ours yet.
Okay. We can see it on ours. I don't know if that helps.
I can see the opening page.
Yeah. Just ask Thomas to move on one. Oh.
I'm not quite sure what happened there. Isn't technology wonderful?
Yeah, it's okay. We can see it, Thomas. So I think if you're okay to just move through the slides one at a time, I can tell you when to move. So if you go to the next slide, that's it. Lovely. All right. So
we're getting there now.
Do you want to just check your agenda, Angie?
That's fine. I can see it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right. Thanks, Thomas. Can you move on to the next slide? Okay, and for anyone who doesn't know who I am, then obviously, yeah, Head of Coastal Partnership East, and we manage the coastal management elements of North Norfolk, Great Yarmouth and East Suffolk Council. So thanks, Thomas. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick run through today from national and strategic perspective, what the team have been up to and what we've been doing. Since last year, we've been looking at the Climate Change Committee report from the summer of 2021 with a number of other reports that came out last summer, which were clearly identifying some of the risks that coastal change presents, particularly to a coast like Norfolk, which has a lot of soft eroding coastline. We've been working very closely with some of our national colleagues at the Local Government Association, Coastal SIG, and with DEFRA and the Environment Agency to understand how some of those recommendations from those reports are going to be picked up. We attended a conference in January in virtual world, anyway, Coastal Futures session, which was run by Rachel Hill and was attended by the Minister, and that was Rebecca Powell. And the session we were in was called Adapt or Die, which was quite a strong heading, but it was deliberate so that we could have a really good discussion about some of the very significant risks that those reports from last summer identified. And I'm very pleased to have taken part in that session and presented some of the challenges and opportunities that we have on our coast and some of the work that Coastal Partnership East is doing with our councils. Something that's really struck me from that report last summer is the emphasis on the number of properties on our coast at erosion risk probably doesn't do us any favours. At the moment, there's around 12,000 properties at risk around England and Wales. And I think we understand that even when properties are at risk, it's not just the properties that are impacted, and the sense of community and the wider coastal community viability is affected, particularly when we know roads or infrastructure and businesses will also be impacted. So one of the things that we're trying to tease out from the recommendations from last year is that we start to talk about coastal viability more rather than property numbers. And we'll be weaving that into our work over the next couple of years, because we think that strengthens our case when we're having conversations with our national colleagues and government departments. I'm really pleased to say that the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy, which was signed off last year, the action plan is now going to be published shortly for the next 12 months ahead. And some of the members of the CPE team have attended workshops on the particularly on resilience measures and strategy delivery and the innovative resilience programme. We've been able to include some hooks around the fact that there is currently a big driver for biodiversity net gain around all of our work in FSERM, but we don't actually have any policy or processes to do anything around biodiversity net gain around soft eroding frontages. So we're pushing for some guidance on that, because we think that will be very important for coasts like Norfolk. We're also putting forward some ideas around the value of sediment. So as cliffs erode and feed beaches and offer both environmental and natural flood risk management benefits, we'd like to see if we can value that in some way. And then obviously we might be able to attract funding from different sources to support some of our more vulnerable eroding coastlines. We've just had word this morning that the National Research and Development team at the Environment Agency are picking up the challenge that we set last year around the need to understand the mental health impacts of coastal change. The Environment Agency have undertaken some really good work around mental health impacts of flooding with some of their partners, and we would like to see something similar around erosion risk in particular. And this is because not only does it help identify the problem and wrap that need and that support around communities impacted by that, but there is an opportunity to influence the partnership funding calculator and how we might receive funds in future we're able to link that in. We're also linking in with planning reform that is going on at the moment, and Rachel Hill's National Environment Agency team are now going to have a much broader planning remit as well. So it's good to see coast and planning coming together under Rachel and being able to have conversations about the longer term planning frameworks we might need to deal with both ongoing defences, but also adaptation as well. And obviously there's been a lot of work going on around the shoreline management plan refresh and the national coastal erosion risk management plans, but I think other people might be touching on those later, so I won't talk about that now. In terms of funding, we are as a team across Norfolk and Suffolk tapping into all the potential routes for funding that have come through in the last couple of years. So the traditional flood defence grant and aid routes, we are embarking on the Kramer Munsley scheme, for example, locally. We've tapped into the Green Recovery Fund through Paul Mackey's team. We're trying to set up some pipeline funding works to get projects up and running and going. And we're also tapping into what's called the Other Government Department Fund to see where we can bring funding in for broader delivery of wider benefits. And where we can, we'll accelerate schemes around the coast to try and maximise on any funding opportunities that are out there. Thank you, Thomas. So just coming across to the LGA Coastal SIG, a number of officers are working across the LGA Coastal SIG working groups and attend the officer and the SIG meetings. This working group at the moment, we have got an adaptation working group, which Angie chairs, and I take the lead on as an officer with supporting Emily Cunningham, who is the lead officer for the Coastal SIG. A number of the things that I was just talking about in terms of getting our points across and into strategies and action plans that are going on at a national level have been done through this group and through the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Funding Group. Also, we've been looking at coastal beach safety. A lot of challenges on the back of COVID with people rushing out to the coasts, wanting to benefit from the amazing coasts that we've got. And so that brought a lot of challenges around the numbers of people at the coast and how we manage their safety when they're there. So there's been a lot of work going on around that as well. And just a few of the bits of work we're doing there in the adaptation working group. We're currently just finalising our action plan for the next 12 months, which we'll happily share through this group, through this forum shortly. And also looking ahead really about what's coming. So there's the all-party parliamentary group on coast, and we are working with our coastal partners around the country to develop evidence for and ahead of the next election, so that the coast is well thought about ahead of the next election. The LGA Coastal SIG continues to call for a dedicated coastal minister to support a whole range of coastal issues and opportunities. I've mentioned this kind of new narrative, perhaps something like the Coast Matters, so that it knits together the coast around the whole of the country and starts to hopefully draw some attention to the coast and why the coast should matter to everyone. And we also have an initiative called Motion for the Ocean, which again, Emily has been leading on, and Angie has recently taken to Council in North Norfolk to progress a whole range of different initiatives across the country that will support the health and well-being of our local coastal waters effectively. Thank you. So at a strategic level within the team, I'm really pleased to say that our business plan is hopefully going to the designers shortly, and we'll be able to circulate our business plan later in March and early April. That's setting out a 3-year forward look of what Coastal Partnership East is hoping to achieve over the next 3 years. We're continuing to progress our business case for the Norfolk and Suffolk transition programme, and we are on track to get that across to the Environment Agency again later in March for their consideration. Hopefully then we'll be able to draw down funding from the summer onwards and start working with our community pilot groups. The Coastal Losses Innovation Funding and Finance Project has reached a really key milestone in identifying potential alternative routes to fund funding mechanisms for those that are most impacted by coastal erosion, both at a property level and at a community level. And we've got some local and more strategic funding options there, and we'll be embedding those into our coastal transition programme to make sure that we develop those further, and we'll be coming back to the forum with a more detailed update on that probably at the next meeting. I know Lord Danett will be joining us later, but I just wanted to mention the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance and the fact that the team have been working up a new coastal members group, and we've been making links with our Environment Agency colleagues and colleagues at Norfolk County Council and across the coastal authorities to make sure that we have got strong governance on the coast and routes into the resilience teams and also the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. And that's well supported by all of the coastal councils and the partners. And I think we hope to have our first coastal members meeting in the next couple of months. We're just agreeing the terms of reference for that at the moment. And finally, CPE has been working behind the scenes to build our team. We've had a number of people join the team recently, and we are continuing to grow and strengthen the team with all the challenges and the opportunities we've got coming. Thank you. Okay, just to remind everybody of the themes that we work to across Coastal Partnership East, we're obviously working closely with our Environment Agency colleagues on the monitoring programme and making sure we have the evidence we need. We are getting our planning and our wider sort of spatial and development colleagues involved in our work so that we can make sure that we have opportunities down the line for a well-planned adaptive approach if we need one. We're working closely with our communities and businesses and have developed a number now of really good virtual platforms, particularly with COVID, but that's also allowed us to reach communities and demographic that we perhaps don't always get when we hold things in sort of traditional halls, and certainly reaching different age groups now as a result of virtual village halls. We're on track for managing all of our assets. I'm sure Brian or Fiona will be talking about that later, but we've delivered a number of really good pieces of work, albeit that we've also been struck by storms, as many people have, and we're making sure that the assets we've got are in good condition, as well as embarking on a number of capital projects. Our funding team are working hard to find funding for all the projects we would want to try and deliver. And obviously, from my perspective, making sure that the team and the partnership are supported going forward. Thank you, Thomas. And just to remind everybody about the Coastal Transition Programme, in addition to our traditional capital work that we do in places like Cromer and Munsley, we're also looking at the softer eroding areas of our coast and how we support communities and businesses to transition towards more resilient options for the future. And that's the piece of work we're currently doing, just getting our outline business case sorted out so that we will hopefully have funding to take that forward this summer. The programme that we've got planned out will cover spatial planning and development, engagement and communication, funding, how we can transition our assets, both our own and those of others, third-party infrastructure providers, so roads and sewage treatment works, and that will all feed back into policy and process at a national level and largely through the LGA Coastal SIG as well. I think the clip update I've mentioned already, so if we could just move on to the next slide. And I know Lord Dannett's going to be here shortly, so I'll pass on that slide as well, Thomas, but that's just to mention the NSFA. So the team's growing. I'm really pleased to say that we are attracting some really great people to the team. Most recently, we've had Colin Bye join us. We've also got I'm just trying to remember now who we've got coming across. We've got Chris Finbo, who's just joined us from the Environment Agency. Peter Germany has joined us from King's Lynn, West Norfolk, to take forward some of our shoreline management plan works. We've got Thomas, who's on the line today, who was obviously at the previous forum. So I think at the end of the day, we've got a really great group of people now that we're building up, all different backgrounds, and that's what we really need to be able to take forward the type of coastal work that we need to do. Thank you. And I think this was just to mention, really, this is actually an old slide, but it was just to mention that the Norfolk and Suffolk Coast and Estuary Conference for 2022 is coming to us again, I think around October time later this year. And I believe I'm right in saying that this year we're going to be focusing on the environment, and we are looking for speakers and ideas for that conference. So if you would like to get in touch with us, Sharon Belize or Angie, do just let us know or contact me if there's anything you would really like to hear about at that conference. Thank you. Okay, Angie.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Karen and Thomas. I know it's quite challenging to get all the bits and pieces together. Now, we are absolutely delighted that General the Lord Dannant can join us this morning. He was, as you know, appointed to lead the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance after the particularly bad flooding about 12 months ago. It's absolutely vital that flooding is managed properly. More and more we have sea level rise. We're getting extreme weather events which are causing surface water flooding. So to get all the various people together that have anything to do with flooding, like the County Council, which is the lead local flood authority, the Internal Drainage Board, who try to keep our feet dry, and also us as coastal protection authorities in some places, and the Environment Agency. So with no more to do, I will hand over to you, Lord Dannant.
Angie, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I missed the start of the meeting. I had the event in my diary, but I found I hadn't got the link in my electronic diary, but we got there in the end, and I was very pleased to catch up with most of Karen's brief. Well, as the chair has introduced, going back to autumn 2020, which we'll all remember as being a period of extremely unusual and heavy rainfall, this culminated on the 23rd of December 2020 with an extraordinary rain event, the result of which over that Christmas period and into the new year 2021 resulted in over 100 flooding events across the county of Norfolk. This caused the County Council, as the lead local flood authority, to think about the degree of priority that they had placed on flood protection and water management in the county, and came to the not unreasonable conclusion that perhaps not enough emphasis had been placed on it in the past. So it was decided to form what has become the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance, and Andrew Proctor, the leader of Norfolk County Council, invited me to be an independent chair, or the independent chair of the new Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance, which I accepted to do. And it's been an interesting and challenging 12, 13, 14 months that I've been running with this particular set of responsibilities. So we had to look, first of all, at what our overall challenge was. And you'll be very well aware, particularly having heard Karen's brief, of the challenges that we have in our coastal areas. Coastal Partnership East is doing a cracking job. And as Karen has briefed, we've now widened that out by having discussions with Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council, and they are going to join the coastal members group that Karen just talked about. But then we also have considerable inland challenges, and very many of the flooding issues that occurred back in December, January 2021 were inland. So we've also formed an inland group, which is being chaired by Trevor Holden, who is the Chief Executive of South Norfolk and Broadland District Councils. But as the chair intimated in the introduction, probably the most important thing is that all risk managers across the county are members of the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance. I was quite surprised to find that that's numbered no less than 36. And what we managed to do is bring them all around the table, albeit initially largely a virtual table, to work together to improve water management in the county. That's both flood prevention, but also realizing that in the east, we get less than our fair share, less than the national average of rain. So there are periods when we are short of water as well. And therefore, Water Resources East is a very important partner amongst those 36 risk managers. And of course, we all know that the ultimate threat to us, exacerbated by climate change and the greater frequency of natural events of an adverse nature, is that we have heavy rainfall inland, such that we have flooding and water trying to find its way through the waterways out into the North Sea, coinciding with a tidal surge and an onshore wind when the North Sea is trying to get into Norfolk. And of course, this poses great problems along the coast, really from Kings Lynn right across your coastline through down to Great Yarmouth and into East Suffolk. So with that realization of the magnitude of the task, we've done a number of things over the last 12, 14 months. In terms of things that we could do quickly, and because this, at the end of the day, this is all about people, we got agreement to produce a new single flood warning number for Norfolk, which has been distributed widely in an updated leaflet, which in theory was sent to every household in the county. I say in theory because although the county council paid for the post office to do a complete leaflet drop, I'm not sure it got to absolutely everybody. But all the information in that leaflet is on the county council website and very much available to everybody, including that one number for Norfolk when there is a flood alert. Going on beyond that, we then looked at the areas that had flooded in December, January 2020, 2021, and picked out a list of 16 most difficult issues and brought together on each of those 16 difficult issues all the authorities that had some responsibility for sorting out that particular problem in that particular locality. And we appointed one of those authorities to be in the lead. So that 16, that tranche one list of 16 are being worked on as we speak. Important thing is to make a plan to solve these problems. Having got a plan, you can cost it. And then we've started the business of arguing the case for the money that we need to carry out the works. And we've now moved on to a second tranche of some other 12 to 15 other sites, which themselves are a problem. Now, going on with all that, we put together an overall strategy for Norfolk, which was signed off by all members of the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance by September last year. And that has meant that we've been able to present to DEFRA and to the Environment Agency, and therefore to central government, that Norfolk has got a comprehensive plan to deal with both its inland and its coastal issues. And this has given us a much more significant voice in trying to make the case for additional resources. Indeed, this meant that 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was able to have, accompanied by George Freeman, the Mid-Norfolk MP, a very useful meeting with Rebecca Powell, the minister responsible for flooding. And we made a whole range of points to her, and particularly also our need for £83 million to deal with the costs of the tranche one sites, difficult sites that I mentioned just now. It's also enabled us to have a meeting with the chair of the Environment Agency to make the point to her, particularly as far as the coast is concerned, that this North Norfolk, Norfolk coast and parts of the Suffolk coast are particularly at risk as we see global warming, rising sea levels. And our coast, unlike, say, the Cornish coast or the Welsh coast, which is characterized by rock and granite and whatever, our coast is a very soft coast, and that we do need to be raised up the priority list for resources. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is that having got a Norfolk strategy agreed by all 36 risk managers, we've been able to get our voice heard much more loudly in central government through the Environment Agency and through DEFRA, and have got the ear of the relevant ministers. And indeed, we've also written to Michael Gove, who has overall responsibility for funding allocation.
Ian Scott.
Join the meeting.
For these types of projects. And just a couple of other comments before I pipe down. Another initiative which I think is very relevant as far as North Norfolk is concerned, the River Burn once again flooded very badly in December, January 2020, 2021. And the 6 parishes along the River Burn came together and formed the River Burn Flood Forum. I've very much taken that on as a pilot scheme. The point being is that our coastline is characterized by a number of important but small rivers that gather the water in their catchment areas, and that water then flows away to the North Sea. Well, the catchment principle is fine, but if the water that's caught in that catchment area can't flow properly down the watercourse out to the North Sea, that's when we start to get flooding along these small river valleys. So therefore, we've taken the River Burn as a pilot scheme. We have bid, and I think we've bid successfully for a considerable amount of money, which is going to fund an officer for a number of years, which Norfolk Rivers Trust under David Diggins is going to host, to work up this pilot scheme for the River Burn and then roll that scheme out to the other small rivers like the Stiffkey and so on along the coast. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of what the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance is, our realisation of the magnitude of the task we've got. We're approaching it in a short-term and a long-term basis with inland and coastal issues very much in mind. And I'm very grateful, looking around at the attendees at this meeting, a number of people I recognise who are playing an active part in the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance. And I'm very grateful for the enthusiastic support that you are giving this initiative, which I think is really important to make sure that we can reduce the likelihood of people's lives being ruined, their homes and businesses being ruined as a result of either inland flooding or coastal flooding. Easy to say these things, there's a lot of work to be done, but we are on the case. Chair, thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Are you able to take questions if there are any? I know you've got quite a lot of pressures with media interviews at the moment.
Well, talking about flooding in Norfolk is probably rather more agreeable than the war in Ukraine, but I'm good for a few minutes if anyone's got some questions, but easy ones, okay, please, or otherwise difficult ones I'll write to you.
Right. I'm going to have to rely on my support officers to actually introduce anybody that might need to speak. I can't see hands at the moment, so you might have got away with it.
Good. Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm more than happy. I mean, all the district councils are represented on the NSFA, so please do feed things up through the district council, either to the county council or directly to Nick Tupper and Phil Lester, who are the two officers who are working with me. Much rather know what people's problems are than just guess at them.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's a great honour for you to come and join us, and good luck with what you're doing. It's absolutely desperately needed. We know that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Tom. Right. Our final session before we break is an update from John Davis, who's chairman of North Norfolk Fishermen's, I'm not sure whether it's society or association, he'll have to tell me, and obviously supported by Julian Gregory, who's an old friend from Eastern Ifka. I don't know who's going to start first. All I can see, Thomas, at the moment is the heading.
Sorry, Andrew. Yeah, I've put the Eastern Ifka slides in first if they want to talk through them, and then John Davies at the end if that works.
Okay. Are we happy with that, John and Julian?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, Julian, over to you.
Thank you very much. For those who don't know me, Julian Gregory, Chief Executive Eastern Ifka. I was asked to pop along and do an update on our work on Cromer MCZ, but nobody mentioned that I'll be following Lord Dannatt, so no pressure there then. For those of us those of you who don't know who we are, we're one of 10 inshore fisheries and conservation authorities around the coast of England, including the Isles of Scilly, and we manage, we do what it says in the tin, really, that we manage inshore fisheries and the environment, the impact of fishing activity on the environment, hence the title conservation, and we work out to 6 nautical miles at sea. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And again, please. So our district stretches from just south of the Humber round to Felixstowe, Harwich, into Suffolk, with the boundary with the neighbouring Ifka running down the centre of the River Stour. One of the key issues for us is that 96% of our district is covered by a marine protected area of one designation or another, and that's the highest amount for any Ifka in the country. The Wash Embayment has multiple designations, and I don't know if you can see the titles on there, but we have triple SIs, which you might be familiar with, special areas of conservation, special protection areas, Ramsar sites. So we've got a number of designations. So the conservation element of our remit is significant. Next slide, please. This slide just shows you some of the primary MPAs in our district. And of course, the one we're going to talk about this morning is Cromer Shoal Chalk Beds Marine Conservation Zone. And in particular, the potential impact upon the local fishing industry, which I'm sure you all appreciate is part of the socio-economic fabric of our coastline. The Cromer crab brand, of course, is known nationally and indeed internationally. Next slide, please. So the MCZ, that's the MCZ, so it stretches from Weybourne round to in the region of Haysborough, and nearly out to the 6 mile line. You see the line that's running behind it, that's the boundary of our district. And what you can see in terms of different colours, they show the different sediments or the nature of the seabed. Next slide, please. The key issue for us is looking at fishing activity on what we refer to as rugged chalk, and what some people would refer to as a reef. It's close inshore, and what you can see there on the slide with the red area that's shaded red is where we think it is at the moment. When I say think, we kind of know where it is, but we're mapping it precisely because we need to fully understand the extent of it. And like many things in the marine environment, there are an awful lot of unknowns out there, and indeed, marine conservation is. While it's been going on for a long time, it's only become more mainstream over recent years. Next slide, please. So the thing with activities in the marine environment is that most are assessed before they're allowed to take place. The difference with fishing is that it's already happening, so assessment is retrospective. Fisheries are actually licensed by the MMO, but as I say, the IFCO are the local manager for certain functions. And in very simple terms, the process is that the site will be designated. That will be followed by conservation advice from Natural England. We then undertake an assessment, and we assess the interaction of fishing gear and fishing activity with the environment, and we make a judgment as to whether or not any management is required. That then goes back to Natural England, and they will issue their formal advice to see whether they agree with us or whether we've still got some areas of difference. Next slide, please. So following the assessment, the options are do nothing, no management required. Just to give you an indication of the scale of the task, DEFRA's revised approach to the management of fishing activity in marine protected areas led to something in the region of 13 to 1,400 different interactions that we had to assess. So it's a significant task. So the first option obviously is do nothing, no management required. The next thing we consider is voluntary measures such as agreements and codes of practices. And in fact, we're just agreeing a code of practice currently with Norfolk fishermen. And then the final one is formal bylaws. We have bylaw making powers under the Marine and Coastal Access Act. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by management options? Well, typically we can put restrictions on effort, fishing effort. We can put restrictions on gear or requirements on fishing gear. We can close areas to fishing. We can bring in requirements for monitoring, vessel tracking, catch returns. And what we're using more and more nowadays are permit schemes, because they allow the authority to introduce and vary flexible permit conditions in line with the changing circumstances of the fishery, which is a really useful tool. Next slide, please. So the timeline for Cromer MCZ, it was designated in January of 2016. That followed a lot of work, and I think it's probably quite important to acknowledge that when the site was designated, the general acceptance was that potting activities, so crab and lobster potting, would be okay within the MCZ. And for that reason, I think it's fair to say that the fishing industry largely supported the designation of the site. We undertook our initial assessment in September of 2018, which concluded that potting activity was probably okay, confirmed what everyone thought. And Natural England informally agreed with that the following month. The month after that, third-party concerns were expressed about the impact of fishing activity, and that led to a dive survey, which was conducted in the summer of 2019. And that led to new advice to us, which was notably different than we previously understood the situation to be. And as a consequence, we established revised management structures to set up a project to take the work forward. Next slide, please. So the summary of the advice from Natural England is that potting damages rugged chalk, some people say call a reef. And whilst it can damage flat areas or areas of cobble and flint, this damage is not considered significant. So that area on the earlier slide that was shaded red is the important area, it's a rugged chalk. And whilst it's acknowledged that individual incidents are small, cumulatively the effect may be to hinder the conservation objectives as a site. And in particular, pots left in the water for long periods, stored and lost pots, were the most damaging. Next slide, please. This slide is probably the key bit. So the second bullet point is quite clear that if we can't adopt an adaptive risk management approach, then we need to be precautionary and ban any interactions, fishing activity on the rugged chalk. I can't sugarcoat this. That would have a devastating impact on the inshore fishing industry on the North Norfolk coast. Adaptive risk management is, if you like, I suppose I would describe it as a bit of a lifeline, because it gives us the opportunity to see if we can manage that activity to get the level of damage to an acceptable level. And within that, we're focusing on lost and stored pots. Next slide, please. So what is adaptive risk management? In very simple terms, it combines management and research. So we put some management in and we research, it's supported by research to see how effective it is. And it's an iterative process. The idea is it's evidence-based, proportionate and participatory. So we're working very much in partnership with the likes of Natural England and the fishing industry. Next slide, please. In order to make progress and to be businesslike about the delivery of this project, we've got a formalised structure, the project board, which I chair, and we have 2 task and finish groups who undertake the work on behalf of the project, and they are, it aligns with the adaptive risk management, research and management groups. Importantly, we've established a stakeholder group because we recognise that there are wide and varied interests in the MCZ and the rugged chalk. So we've set that group up. We've been meeting online. We hope at some point to be able to meet face to face, but there is a line from that group into the project board, so we can take information and data which is going to help us with our work, and we can feed it into the work of the task and finish groups. We've got all sorts of people attending, including recreational divers, conservationists, beach cleaners, commercial fishermen, people with the district council, people with an interest in tourism in the area. So if anyone's interested in joining, then please do make contact. In terms of, next slide, please. In terms of our current activity, the research is focusing on feature mapping. I mentioned earlier about the importance of being able to understand where the rugged chalk is, because if we're going to introduce any management measures, then we need them to be surgical and applied to the right areas. And we're also looking at fishing activity mapping. And to that end, we've introduced the use of the voluntary use of tracking devices on some local fishing boats, which is proving to be very effective. They're actually trackers that are used in vehicles and commercial vehicle fleets, quite inexpensive, but they're providing a wealth of information for us. On the management side, we're just finalising a code of practice to deal with lost and stored pots. And in fact, I met with the Norfolk District Fishermen's Society last night and another society on Monday evening. And we've got a lot of support for that code of practice. And we're also looking at a protocol for recovering lost pots when they're found by divers or where fishermen advises that they've lost them and we think we know where they are, then we're going to try and put something in place which can help us to recover them. Next slide, please. So the last few slides are really just a bit of interest. So obviously working in the marine environment is very challenging. Seeing what's going on underwater in the North Sea is very difficult because most times you peer out to sea and it's got a bit of a muddy brown sort of appearance to it. The North Norfolk coast, we get some windows of opportunity, usually during the summer months where the visibility underwater becomes clearer and we're able to see what's going on. So we've invested in a state-of-the-art drone, underwater drone, which is called a blue ROV, remotely operated vehicle. You'll see that it's unlike a flying drone. We can't use radio waves to control it, so that it has to have a tether back to the mother vessel to fly it. Sometimes we tow it, sometimes it works under its own power, but it's quite challenging when you're working around fishing gear, and of course the features underwater to operate without snagging or colliding with something. Next slide, please. So here are just some images of the rugged chalk, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. There are some parts of it which are more impressive in terms of the way they look, and they do look very much like a reef and what you might associate with a reef. Next slide, please. So here we have some images of some active gear, what are known as parlour pots, used for fishing for crab and lobster. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of the impact that's caused by the fishing gear. There seem to be three main types of impact. One is the obvious, which is a pot colliding with a piece of chalk and knocking a piece off. Another is the abrasion of a pot sitting on the sea floor and moving around a little with the currents, tends to abrade the surface. And then we have sometimes wear caused by ropes. So pots are normally deployed on what are known as shanks. So the shank is a long rope with a number of pots attached to it, and you can see in the images there that the ropes can abrade and cut into the chalk, which is actually very soft. I think the important thing to bear in mind here is that whenever you see images of damage like that, it might engender a bit of reaction. I think it's probably important to say that we think that the scale of that damage is not significant, but of course, as we do more and more research, then we will get more information on that, and we'll be able to try and put some kind of assessment on how much of the site is being impacted by the kind of damage that you can see in those photographs. Next slide, please. So that's the final slide, and I'll wrap up now and hand over to John to say a few words. But these are our goals, and they might sound obvious, but we think that they're important. So we want the MCZ to be well managed and to support a thriving local fishery. The fishery supporting local livelihoods and long-term prospects. The features of the MCZ are maintained in good condition. And importantly, to achieve all this, there's a positive collaborative relationship between stakeholders and regulators built on trust and shared ambitions. What I do say to the fishing industry is I can't sugarcoat this. We really hope that adaptive risk management will get us to a place where the fishery can continue under managed conditions that are acceptable and within legal parameters. But there is a possibility that we're not successful in that endeavour. So thank you. I'll pause there and hand over to John.
Thank you very much, Julian. I don't suppose that John Davis needs much introduction to us all. Davis family have been fishing out of Cromer for generations. John and his family are friends of mine, I have to say. And you're very welcome, John, and I was particularly pleased to hear you on Radio Norfolk on Saturday morning. I thought you did a great job. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Angie, and thank you, Greg. Yes, we were asked to sort of put something together, and I worked with Greg quite a lot through the IFCA committee, and we have been working extremely hard over this project because, you know, it is a heck of a threat to our industry. Not just the industry, you've got to think about tourism and things like that, and just money going to the general, community. And we are having an awful lot of meetings. I have another one this afternoon with Greg's team, trying to come up with a solution to this. But of course, we're working on chalk, which is a very, very fragile, fragile thing, and you are gonna have an impact on it. We've never said any different to that. But this is a fishery that obviously I hold very dear to my heart, as well as a lot of other people along the coast. And like I say, that's all local jobs and local money going into local communities. And, you know, working this code of best practice, we are at the minute in the adaptive risk management, we are sincerely hoping that we are going to come up with, you know, a workable way forward. But unfortunately, if you look at the charts that we see earlier, you know, the seabed is unique here. We haven't got features like this anywhere else in our district. And I'm afraid the reason we are here with this fishery is all to do with this habitat. You know, dragging boats up and down the beach may look very picturesque and very nice for the tourists to look at, and the postcards and the paintings in the art shops. But we don't do it because we like dragging up the beach. If we could work out a harbour at Yarmouth or somewhere like that, and this fish would be there, people would migrate there and work out there for easiness. But the fishery is not there because there's not the habitat. So we know it's very unique. And for generations, we have, like I said, we've been guardians of it, trying to look after it, keeping trawlers away, dredges away, and things like that. But now all of a sudden we are the villains. You know, when this was all set up, we had the net gain inquiry looking into the MCZ, and there was never, ever any financial impact took into anything like that, because Potton was deemed, you know, a safe and to cohabit with the MCZ. But now we're 5-6 years down the line and the goalposts have changed. And let's say all of a sudden we are the bad guys. But, you know, it's something that has gone on for generations, as I've said many times. And, you know, we want to see it continue. But we are struggling to get the youngsters to come into the job without things like this holding over us. And I know 1 or 2 youngsters have spoke about it, and they said, well, you know, we're not looking to invest into this or go into it because we don't know what future there is. And I know any of us don't know what our future holds. But the industry is really, really worried about this. And it is something we could lose with the uniqueness along our coast of what we do. Because simply without that chalk, we haven't got a fishery. You know, and we are trying extremely hard. And I'll take my hat off to IFCA. Fishery officers and fishermen haven't always got along, and we still don't always get along. But, you know, they are working extremely hard with this to try and come up with a workable thing. But Natural England are sort of holding this hammer over us at the minute, and we just don't know what way to turn. We've had a lot of support throughout the community, but the community needs to be aware of this and what is going on. You know, it seems perfectly all right for wind farms and things like to plough through the chalk. We haven't had any gas pipelines of late. I've seen the sea turn white when they're laying a gas pipeline. Nobody seems to worry about that. And they may know a little bit more now as an MCZ, but normally money talks and money gets it through. But unfortunately, we don't have that, you know, that behind us to fight these sort of battles. You know, there's simple things that what makes you shake your head a little bit. I know with your coastal protection, you're using a lot of granite boulders and rock armour and things like that. And we've suggested to Natural England and that, you know, when they're putting these cables and things through, you know, can we use granite bowl instead of ploughing through the chalk to protect it? And I'm still mystified with the answer I got. We can't possibly do that because granite is not natural in this environment. That granite would enhance, you know, the seabed, the reef, if you like, or shoal as we call it, and increase the habitat. But apparently it's not natural enough. But I still mind, you know, let them plough through it and do things like that. Like I say, we're not shading away with we have an interaction with the chalk. Of course we do. But, you know, would this fisheries and chalk be there if we hadn't looked after it for many, many years? There was a very interesting thing in the local paper the other day showing the land mass we've lost, you know, from when records begin, villages, towns and things like that. And if you looked at that, where they put this round the coastline, this was actually where the raised chalk is now. So natural erosion is going to wear a lot of this away. And there was mention today about, Greg mentioned about pot strikes and things like this. There's divers going down and see a bit of chalk, and straight away that's a pot strike. nobody's seen this happen. And a lot of these people who are dealing with this don't look at the devastation on our beach after the storms and things that all over this room along the coast fight to protect our coastline. But it's easy to blame a simple fisherman with a little tiny boat. And, you know, I've got to thank Greg and his team for the work they're doing. But we are really, really worried about this. And thank you for letting me have the time to allay this. And if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to ask them.
John, thank you very much for that. We do have a huge amount of sympathy for you. Greg, if I may call you that, is there a timeline on the decisions of all the research that you're doing so we know where we are?
There is nothing firm in terms of set dates, but I think there is an expectation when we, talk to Natural England that over the next 2 to 3 years we'll be making progress. And I think the thing with adaptive risk management is it's not an endless cycle. You saw the second, or the part of their advice that says that if we can't do this, it's not going to work, then they believe we need to be precautionary and to bring in closures. So we to a certain extent, we're up against the clock, which is why we're trying to be quite efficient with our project management structure and to crack on with the work. But we're a small organisation working in a very challenging environment.
Mm. No, I understand that. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for either John or Greg? I see no hands. Right, thank you very much, both of you. Just before we have a break, we have another honoured guest this morning. We have the High Sheriff of Norfolk, Michael Gurney, and I don't know, I think he wants to say a few thanks to people that are working on the coast. So over to you, Michael, if you can.
Angie, thank you very much. This is just a thank you. As High Sheriff, I'm responsible for volunteers across the county as well as law and order. And I just wanted to thank everybody involved in this, particularly all the councillors who give of their time free and everybody else volunteering to try to help and support this coast. We know how important this is for livelihoods, for safety, and for the future going forward for Norfolk. You give of your time freely and willingly, and it is extremely generous of you. Thank you. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you, Michael. That's very welcome. And I think some of you will have picked up that I got passed through our council the motion for the ocean the other day. And much of what we're doing is looking at how our sea is. We are very lucky in North Norfolk in so much as we've got more blue flag beaches than probably anybody else in Norfolk. But to the beach cleaners and also to fishermen who are actually really proactively bringing back their abandoned tackle and things like that. So thanks to everybody. Just endorsing what Michael's had to say. It's now 1 minute past 11. My crib sheet says we have 10 minutes. So if you can come back just after 10 to 11, it'll give you a chance to get a cup of coffee and do anything else you need to do. So see you in about 10 minutes.